The monitoring screen flickered with an impossible reading. Rylus leaned closer to the display, his three-fingered hand trembling slightly as he adjusted the sensors. Something had just entered Drathan territory, and it made no sense. A single vessel, moving at steady speed, making no attempt to hide or evade detection. "Supervisor Harvin, we have an unauthorized entry in Sector 9, Rylus called across the station's operations center. His voice carried the uncertainty of someone who had never encountered such a situation in 12 years of service. Harvin approached the monitoring station with heavy steps. The Drathan supervisor's scales rippled with irritation. Unauthorized entries were rare, and when they happened, they usually involved smugglers or lost civilian ships that quickly turned around once they realized their mistake. This vessel showed no such concern. "Identification," Harvin demanded. "Unknown configuration. The database shows no match. It's transmitting basic greeting protocols in multiple languages, including ours." Rylus brought up the ship's profile on the main screen. "Size indicates a military vessel. Heavy armor. Advanced power signature." Harvin studied the data with growing interest. The ship called itself Defiant. The species identification came through as human. He had heard whispers about humans, distant rumors from traders who ventured into the outer reaches of explored space. A species that kept to themselves, rarely involving themselves in galactic politics. "Contact Fleet Commander Corvin. Tell him we have a situation." Harvin watched as the ship continued deeper into Drathan space, maintaining its course with unwavering determination. "And dispatch 3 cruisers to intercept. Let's see what these humans want." Aboard the Defiant, Captain David Reed studied the tactical display. 3 vessels were changing course, heading directly toward his position. He had expected this response. The Drathan Empire controlled this entire region of space, and they were not known for their hospitality to uninvited guests. "They're hailing us, Captain," said Communications Officer Williams from his station. "Standard challenge protocol. They're demanding we power down engines and prepare to be boarded." Reed took a slow breath. The next few minutes would determine whether his mission succeeded or failed before it truly began. "Open a channel, Williams, all frequencies." The viewscreen activated, showing the angular face of a Drathan ship commander. The alien's eyes narrowed when he saw Reed's human features. "I am Captain David Reed of the Earth vessel Defiant. We are on a humanitarian mission to deliver critical medical supplies to a human colony beyond your territory. Our route through your space is the fastest path, and time is essential. We request safe passage and mean no harm to your empire." The Drathan commander's expression shifted from surprise to something resembling amusement. "You request passage? One ship demands rights from the Drathan Empire? Power down your engines immediately, or we will disable them for you." Reed had hoped for a different response, but he had prepared for this outcome. "I'm sorry, but I cannot comply. Lives depend on our timely arrival. We will continue our course." The channel closed abruptly. On the tactical display, the 3 Drathan cruisers accelerated toward the Defiant, weapons systems coming online. Reed watched their approach with calm focus, his hands steady on the armrests of his command chair. "Shields to maximum. Weapons to defensive mode only. Target their power systems and weapon arrays. I want them disabled, not destroyed." Reed's voice carried absolute authority. His crew had trained for this scenario, running simulations during their long journey to the edge of Drathan space. The first energy blast struck the Defiant's shields, creating ripples of light across the protective barrier. The ship barely shuddered from the impact. Chief Engineer Hayes called up from the engine room, her voice steady. "Shields holding at 96%, Captain. Their weapons are surprisingly weak against our defensive systems. Return fire, precision strikes only." The Defiant's response was surgical. Targeted energy beams lanced out, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. The first Drathan cruiser's weapons went dark within seconds, its power grid overloaded by the precise strike. The second cruiser attempted evasive maneuvers, but the Defiant's targeting systems tracked it effortlessly. Another beam, another disabled weapons array. The third cruiser's commander showed more courage than wisdom, closing the distance and firing continuously. The Defiant's shields absorbed the barrage without strain, while return fire crippled the cruiser's engines, leaving it drifting in space. The entire engagement lasted less than 8 minutes. 3 Drathan military vessels hung powerless in the void, their crews alive but thoroughly defeated. The Defiant had not slowed its forward progress by even a fraction. Reed opened a general broadcast channel. Drathan vessels, we have disabled your weapons and propulsion systems. Your life support remains functional and your distress beacons are active. Help will arrive within the hour. We regret this action was necessary. We seek no conflict with your empire. Back on the monitoring station, Rylus and Harvin watched in stunned silence as the human ship continued past the disabled cruisers without pausing. The engagement data scrolled across their screens, showing a level of technological superiority they had never witnessed. "Get me Fleet Commander Corvin immediately," Harvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell him to mobilize everything. This changes everything." Rylus pulled up the long-range tracking data. The human ship had already traveled another 3,000 kilometers, maintaining its original course and speed as if nothing had happened. "Supervisor, what kind of species crosses our territory like this? They could have destroyed those cruisers easily, but they only disabled them." Harvin had no answer. In all his years serving the Drathan Empire, he had never encountered a species that demonstrated such overwhelming power while showing such restraint. It was a combination that troubled him deeply. The Defiant pressed forward into the heart of Drathan space, its crew focused on a single goal. Behind them, an empire began to realize that something unprecedented had entered their domain. Not an invasion force, not a scouting mission, but something far more dangerous to their understanding of galactic power. One ship with one purpose had made the Drathan military look helpless. And somewhere ahead, deep within their territory, lay the true test of whether the Empire would allow this passage or risk discovering just how powerful these humans truly were. High Archon Severin's private chamber overlooked the capital city of Drathan Prime, where towers of crystalline metal reached toward the purple sky. He stood before a holographic display showing the trajectory of the human vessel, his mind calculating possibilities and threats. The report from Harvin's monitoring station had reached him within the hour, and what he read disturbed him more than any military threat in. "Recent memory. 30 warships," Severin said to the assembled council members. "I want Admiral Corvin to take personal command. This human ship will not reach the inner systems." Defense Minister Talvis nodded his approval, his battle scars visible along his neck ridges. "The fleet will intercept them in the Kara system. There will be no escape this time." Yet even as Severin gave the order, doubt crept into his thoughts. The humans had disabled 3 cruisers without destroying them. That kind of precision suggested technology and training far beyond what intelligence reports had indicated. More troubling was the restraint itself. Conquering species did not show mercy. They demonstrated overwhelming force and crushed resistance. These humans fought like they had rules, like they cared about preserving enemy lives. The fleet assembled near Karis 3, a barren world that served as a military staging point. 30 warships of various classes formed a defensive wall across the human ship's projected path. Admiral Corvin reviewed the formation from his flagship, satisfied that no single vessel could pass through such concentrated firepower. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "The human vessel will arrive in approximately 40 minutes. Corvin had fought in 17 major engagements during the expansion of the Drathan Empire. He knew battle, understood strategy, and recognized when an opponent was either desperate or foolish. This human captain seemed to be neither, which made the situation more dangerous. The Defiant emerged from faster-than-light travel exactly on schedule, sensors immediately detecting the wall of warships ahead. Captain Reed stood on the bridge, his expression unchanged as the tactical display filled with hostile contacts. 30 ships, Chief Engineer Hayes said quietly from her station. "They're serious this time." "They have every right to be," Reed replied. "We're crossing their territory without permission. Open a channel, Williams." Admiral Corvin's face appeared on the view screen, his features stern but controlled. "Human vessel Defiant, you are ordered to halt and surrender your ship. You have violated Drathan sovereignty and engaged our military forces. There will be no further warnings." Reed met the Admiral's gaze directly. "Admiral, I understand your position, but I cannot stop. My ship carries vaccines and medical equipment. Desperately needed by a human colony. A plague is killing our people, and every hour we delay means more deaths. We seek only passage, not conflict." Your problems are not our concern, Corvin replied, though something in his voice suggested the words came from duty rather than conviction. You have 1 minute to comply. The channel closed. Reed turned to his weapons officer. Grant, I need you to listen carefully. When they open fire, we defend ourselves with minimal force. Disable weapons and engines only. No fatal strikes unless absolutely necessary to protect this ship. Understood, Captain. Shields are at full strength. The Drathan fleet opened fire simultaneously, 30 ships unleashing their combined arsenal. Energy beams, kinetic rounds, and missile salvos converged on the Defiant from multiple angles. The human ship's shields lit up like a star, absorbing the tremendous assault with barely a flicker. Inside the Defiant, the crew worked with practiced efficiency. The ship's artificial intelligence calculated firing solutions faster than any organic mind could process, presenting targets to the weapons officer in order of threat priority. Grant's fingers moved across his console, approving strikes with careful consideration. The Defiant's main guns spoke with surgical precision. Each shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy, to incapacitate rather than kill. One by one, Drathan warships found their weapons arrays melted into slag, their engine cores forced into emergency shutdown. The human ship moved through the formation like water flowing around stones, never stopping, never slowing. Admiral Corvin watched in disbelief as half his fleet fell silent within 20 minutes. His flagship had taken 3 direct hits, each one perfectly placed to disable a weapons system without causing critical damage. The humans were toying with them, proving their superiority without inflicting unnecessary casualties. All ships cease fire, Corvin ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. Fall back to defensive positions. Reed saw the Drathan fleet withdraw and felt no satisfaction, only relief. Cease fire. All stations, damage report. Shields at 79% and regenerating, Hayes reported. No hull breaches, no casualties. We're fully operational, Captain. The Defiant continued its journey, leaving behind a stunned Drathan fleet. Reed ordered a message sent on all frequencies, ensuring every ship and monitoring station could hear. We regret the necessity of this engagement. Medical supplies and emergency equipment will be transmitted to any disabled vessels that require them. We wish harm to no one. On Drathan Prime, High Archon Severin received Admiral Corvin's report with a mixture of anger and fascination. The humans had defeated 30 warships without destroying a single one. They offered aid to the very ships that had tried to stop them. This behavior pattern matched no known aggressive species in recorded galactic history. Send for Nalith, Severin ordered his aide. I want our best intelligence operative to research everything available about humans, their history, their culture, their military capabilities. I need to understand what we're dealing with. As the Defiant pressed deeper into Drathan territory, word of the engagement spread through military channels. Soldiers discussed the battle in hushed tones. Officers reviewed the combat footage, analyzing every move the human ship had made. Questions arose that no one could answer. Why show such restraint? Why risk their mission by helping their enemies? What kind of species possessed such overwhelming power but refused to use it for conquest? In the observation stations scattered throughout Drathan space, operators tracked the human ship's progress with growing unease. It maintained course and speed, never deviating, never hesitating. The crew aboard that vessel knew exactly where they were going and nothing would stop them. Captain Reed sat in his quarters during a brief rest period, reviewing casualty reports from the colony. The plague had claimed another 80 lives in the past day. Children made up half that number. He closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of grief before standing and returning to the bridge. They were halfway through Drathan space, and the hardest part still lay ahead. Nalith had served as an intelligence operative for the Drathan Empire for most of her adult life. She had uncovered smuggling operations, exposed rebel cells, and tracked enemy movements across a dozen star systems. Nothing in her extensive experience prepared her for what she discovered about humanity. The records were sparse but consistent. Humans had emerged onto the galactic stage only 70 years ago, establishing colonies slowly and methodically. They traded fairly, respected boundaries, and avoided conflicts whenever possible. Several species had attempted to exploit what they perceived as human weakness, demanding unfair terms or threatening military action. Each time, the humans had simply refused to engage, taking their business elsewhere. What caught Naleth's attention was a report from a Telmari trade coordinator. The Telmari had tried to force humans into an exclusive contract by threatening one of their mining operations. The human response had been swift and confusing. Instead of submitting or retaliating, they had helped the Telmari deal with a pirate problem that had been plaguing their shipping lanes. The gesture had been so unexpected that the Telmari Council had apologized and offered fair terms instead. "They fight by making friends," Naleth muttered to herself, reviewing another incident. A human medical ship had entered a war zone between two minor species, treating casualties from both sides until a ceasefire was negotiated. The humans had lost 3 crew members to crossfire but had never returned fire themselves. High Archon Severin read Naleth's preliminary report with growing concern. These humans were not conquerors or merchants or explorers in any traditional sense. They seemed to operate on principles that made no tactical sense, yet somehow it worked to their advantage. Meanwhile, the Defiant traversed the Tarvis system, a region known for heavy commercial traffic and minimal military presence. Sensors detected a distress signal coming from a civilian transport vessel. Captain Reed's eyes moved to the tactical display, seeing the situation develop in real time. 6 ships surrounding a transport, Tactical Officer Grant reported. Configuration matches Krell raiders. They're demanding the transport surrender its cargo. Reed checked the ship's chronometer. They were already behind schedule due to the fleet engagement. Every minute mattered to the dying colonists. The logical choice was to continue forward, to ignore this situation and focus on the mission. "Alter course to intercept," Reed ordered. "Maximum speed." Hayes looked up from her engineering console, surprise evident on her face. "Captain, we can't afford the delay." "We can't afford to ignore people in danger either," Reed replied quietly. "If we're willing to cross an empire to save our people, we can take 20 minutes to save theirs." The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Between the raiders and their target, the Krell pirates registered the new arrival with predatory interest. 6 against 1 seemed like acceptable odds, especially since they had never heard of humans or their capabilities. The lead raider's captain, a scarred veteran named Drevik, broadcast a warning. "Unknown vessel, this is Krell territory. Leave now or share the fate of this transport." Reed's response was simple and direct. "Leave now, you have 30 seconds. Drevik laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the communication channel. His ships opened fire simultaneously, targeting the Defiant with everything they had. The human ship's point defense systems activated, creating a web of intercepting fire that vaporized every incoming missile before it covered half the distance. The Krell raiders had never encountered such defensive capability. Before they could adjust their tactics, the Defiant's weapons spoke. 6 precise shots, 6 disabled ships. The raiders found themselves drifting in space, their engines dead and weapons offline. Reed opened a channel to the Drathan transport. "This is Captain Reed of the human vessel Defiant. You're safe now. Do you require assistance?" The transport captain, a middle-aged Drathan named Tever, stared at his view screen in shock. "You're human. Why would you help us? We're enemies." "Your people in danger," Reed replied. "That makes you worth helping. Do you need medical attention or repairs?" Tever had commanded civilian vessels for 30 years. He had seen military ships pass by distress calls without a second thought. Resources were always limited, time was always precious, and civilians were always expendable. Yet here was an enemy vessel offering assistance after saving his ship and crew. "Our engines took some damage. Nothing critical, but it would help to have spare parts." The Defiant dispatched repair drones loaded with compatible components. Within an hour, Tever's transport was fully functional. Reed provided coordinates for the nearest Drathan station and wished them safe travels. As the Defiant resumed its course, Tever sent a message to his company headquarters. He described the encounter in detail, struggling to find words that captured what had happened. A human warship, crossing Drathan space on urgent business, had taken time to rescue a Drathan civilian vessel from pirates. Admiral Corvin, still shadowing the human ship from a distance, witnessed the entire incident. He recorded it and transmitted the data to High Archon Severin with a personal note. "They act according to principles we do not understand. They could have ignored the transport. They were already behind schedule due to our engagement. yet they stopped to help our civilians without hesitation. On Drathan Prime, Severin called an emergency council session. He presented all the data collected about the Defiant and its crew. The ship had now crossed through 27 systems, fought 2 engagements, and rescued a civilian transport. Throughout all of this, they had killed no one and asked for nothing in return. Defense Minister Talvis slammed his fist on the conference table. This makes no sense. They have the power to conquer, yet they only defend. They have the opportunity to profit, yet they give aid freely. What do they want? Maybe they want exactly what they claim, Nalith said from her position near the back of the room. Medical supplies for a dying colony. Maybe their mission is exactly as simple and honest as they say. Severin considered this possibility. If true, it meant the Drathan Empire was preventing a humanitarian mission. It meant they were the villains in this situation, not the humans. That realization did not sit well with an empire built on the idea of superiority and righteous expansion. Continue monitoring, Severin ordered. Do not engage unless they threaten Imperial assets directly. I need more time to understand what we're dealing with. The Defiant entered the deeper territories of the Drathan Empire, where the military presence grew stronger and the populations denser. Captain Reed knew the next phase would test them beyond anything they had faced so far. The core systems lay ahead, the beating heart of an empire that had never been challenged so boldly. His crew trusted him. The mission was clear. The stakes could not be higher. And somewhere ahead, children were dying while politicians debated and military commanders watched. The outer marker buoys of the core systems appeared on the Defiant sensors like a wall of light. Beyond them lay Drathan Prime and the most heavily defended space in 200 light-years. Captain Reed studied the readings with the careful attention of a man who understood he was approaching a point of no return. Fleet composition, Reed asked his tactical officer. Grant reviewed the sensor data. With experienced eyes, over 100 warships in defensive formation, multiple ship classes including at least 5 dreadnoughts. They're positioned across all major approach vectors. Chief Engineer Hayes pulled up the navigation charts. Captain, we can route around the core systems. It'll add 16 hours to our journey, but it avoids this confrontation. Reed checked the latest transmission from the colony. Governor Walsh's message had been brief and devastating. The plague was accelerating. They had lost 43 people in the last 12 hours, most of them children under the age of 10. Medical teams were working around the clock, but without the vaccines aboard the Defiant, containment was failing. 16 hours is too long, Reed said quietly. We go through. On Drathan Prime, High Archon Severin faced the most difficult decision of his long political career. His military advisors demanded action. The human ship had humiliated their forces twice. Allowing it to cross the core systems would undermine the Empire's authority in a way that could never be repaired. Yet Nalith's intelligence reports painted a troubling picture. If the humans were telling the truth about their medical mission, and all evidence suggested they were, then preventing their passage would mean Severin was responsible for the deaths of thousands of civilians. Not enemy combatants, not military targets, but sick children and elderly colonists. Fleet Admiral Cashin is requesting orders, High Archon, his aide announced. Severin took a long breath. Tell him to form a blockade, but hold fire. I will speak with this human captain personally. The view screen in the Defiance bridge activated, showing the weathered face of Fleet Admiral Cashin. The Drathan officer was older than most active commanders, with scars that spoke of a lifetime in military service. His eyes held something unexpected: respect. Captain Reed, I am Fleet Admiral Cashin of the Drathan Home Fleet. I have been ordered to prevent your passage through the core systems. Reed nodded slowly. Admiral, I understand your duty, but I have my own. Can I ask you to review the medical data we're transmitting? It shows the situation at our colony. Cashin's expression did not change, but he gestured to someone off-screen. Moments later, files appeared on his displays showing infection rates, mortality statistics, and the desperate state of medical facilities on the human colony world. The Admiral read in silence. 4,000 people at risk, Cashin said finally. Half of them children. Yes, sir. We're carrying vaccines that will stop the plague's spread and treatment protocols that will save most of the currently infected, but only if we arrive within the next 36 hours. Cashin had fought in wars where civilian casualties were considered acceptable losses. He had ordered bombardments of cities and blockades of planets. War was never clean or moral, but this was not war. This was a single ship trying to save children from disease. "I cannot allow you to pass, Captain Reed. My orders are clear." Cashin paused, choosing his words carefully. "However, I can offer you inspection rights. If you submit to a full cargo examination and temporary escort, I can reduce your delay to under 2 hours." Reed considered the offer. 2 hours was acceptable. The risk of a Drathan boarding party was minimal compared to the risk of combat. "I accept your terms, Admiral. We'll power down weapons and lower shields partially for your inspection teams." Within 30 minutes, Drathan soldiers were aboard the Defiant, moving through corridors with weapons ready. They had been briefed to expect anything from biological weapons to hidden military forces. Instead, they found cargo bays filled with medical equipment, refrigerated storage units containing vaccines, and exhausted human crew members who looked at them with curiosity rather than hostility. One of the Drathan inspectors, a medical specialist named Tyrell, stood in the main medical bay reviewing the inventory with Dr. Park, the Defiant's chief medical officer. Thousands of doses of vaccine were stored in temperature-controlled containers, along with antibiotics, surgical supplies, and emergency medical equipment. "This is all for one colony?" Tyrell asked, genuinely curious. Dr. Park nodded, fatigue evident in her eyes. "Our people are dying. We don't have the industrial capacity on the colony to manufacture these vaccines quickly enough. Every hour we delay means more deaths." Tyrell picked up a data pad showing treatment protocols. He had studied medicine for 12 years before joining the military. He understood exactly what he was looking at, and the implications were clear. Without these supplies, the colony's death toll would be catastrophic. "Why risk war for one colony? You could establish a new settlement elsewhere." Dr. Park looked at the Drathan inspector with an expression that held no anger, only sadness. "Because they're our people, we don't abandon our own, would you?" The question hung in the air. Tyrell had no answer. He completed his inspection and reported to Admiral Cashin with complete honesty. "Sir, the cargo is exactly what they claim. Medical supplies, nothing more. This is a humanitarian mission." Cashin forwarded the report to High Archon Severin immediately. The political implications were enormous. If the Empire prevented this mission, the story would spread throughout known space. The Drathan Empire would be known as the power that let children die to maintain authority. Severin read the report 3 times, each word confirming what he had begun to suspect. The humans were not testing Drathan defenses or planning an invasion. They were simply trying to save their people, and they were willing to cross an entire empire to do it. "Open the corridor," Severin ordered. "Let them pass." His military council erupted in protests, but Severin silenced them with a raised hand. "We are not monsters. We are an empire built on strength and honor. There is no honor in preventing a medical mission. The human ship will be allowed passage through a designated corridor under escort. Any violation of this corridor will result in immediate engagement." The home fleet parted, creating a clear path through the core systems. The Defiant moved forward slowly, flanked by Drathan warships on all sides. It was not a gesture of friendship, but of calculated political pragmatism mixed with something deeper that Severin did not want to examine too closely. Captain Reed stood on his bridge, watching the massive Drathan warships maintain their escort positions. Admiral Cashin's face appeared on the view screen once more. "Captain, you have your passage. Stay within the designated corridor and maintain current speed. You will exit our core systems in 8 hours." Reed offered a formal salute, one military officer to another. "Thank you, Admiral. Your honor today will not be forgotten." Cashin returned the salute, and for a brief moment, the two warriors acknowledged each other across the divide of species and empire. Then the channel closed, and both men returned to their duties. The Defiant crossed through the heart of the Drathan Empire, a lone ship surrounded by hundreds of potential enemies, yet unmolested and unharmed. The transition from Drathan core space to the frontier regions brought a subtle shift in atmosphere aboard the Defiant. The crew allowed themselves cautious optimism. They had crossed the most dangerous territory without firing a shot in anger. The colony was now within reach, less than a day's travel away. Captain Reed reviewed the latest message from Governor Walsh. The situation had stabilized slightly, but only because medical teams were working beyond human endurance. Doctors were sleeping in 4-hour shifts. Nurses were administering treatments while fighting back tears of exhaustion. The colony's small hospital was filled beyond capacity, with patients lying in corridors and temporary shelters. Entering the Kepler system now, Captain, reported Navigation Officer Chen. Colony world dead ahead, distance 2 million kilometers. The sensors painted a confusing picture. The colony planet appeared on screens as expected, a small blue-green world in the habitable zone. But orbital scans showed additional vessels, configurations that matched no human design in the database. Unknown ships in orbit around New Providence, Tactical Officer Grant announced. Count is 7 vessels, medium tonnage, advanced power signatures. They're not Drathan. Reed leaned forward in his chair. After crossing an empire to reach this colony, finding unknown aliens in orbit was the last complication he had expected. Hail the colony first. Let's find out what we're dealing with. Governor Patricia Walsh's face appeared on the view screen, and Reed immediately noticed the mix of relief and exhaustion in her expression. She was in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical style and medical scanner marks on her hands from constant work. Captain Reed, thank the stars you made it. We've lost so many already. Walsh's voice cracked slightly before she steadied herself. The ships in orbit are Silith. They arrived 3 days ago in response to our distress signals. Silith, Reed searched his memory but found nothing. I'm not familiar with that species. Neither were we until they showed up. They're peaceful, Captain. They've been defending us from raiders and providing what medical help they can. Without them, we would have lost the colony to pirates days ago. As if summoned by the conversation, one of the unknown vessels moved to intercept the Defiant. A communication request came through immediately, transmitted in perfect human language. The being on the screen was unlike anything in human experience. Tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer between silver and pale blue. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a face that was both alien and somehow expressing clear intelligence and warmth. Captain Reed of the Defiant, I am Vren of the Silith Collective. We have been monitoring your approach with great interest. Your journey across hostile space has been remarkable. Reed found himself liking this alien immediately, though he maintained professional caution. You've been protecting our colony. On behalf of humanity, I thank you. May I ask why? Vren's expression shifted in a way that might have been a smile. Because they needed help, and we were capable of providing it. Is this not reason enough? The familiar philosophy made Reed relax slightly. It should be, but in my experience, most species require more motivation than simple compassion. Most species, perhaps, but we Silith learned long ago that the greatest strength comes from protecting life rather than dominating it. We detected your colony's distress signals weeks ago. By the time we arrived, Krell raiders were already circling, waiting for your defenses to fail completely. The Defiant began immediate transfer operations, shuttles carrying medical supplies down to the surface. Dr. Park led teams to the colony's medical facilities, working alongside exhausted colonial doctors to distribute vaccines and implement treatment protocols. Captain Reed accepted Vren's invitation to meet via holographic communication in the Defiant's conference room. The Silith commander appeared as a full-size projection, allowing both captains to interact as if they were in the same physical space. Your crossing of the Drathan Empire will be studied for generations, Vren said, settling into a neutral posture. We have been observing galactic politics for 3 centuries, and never have we seen such audacity combined with such restraint. You were watching the entire time. Our sensor networks are extensive. We saw your first engagement, the fleet battle, the rescue of the civilian transport. Each action taught us more about humanity. Vren paused, 4 eyes focusing intently on Reed. You are a warrior species, yet you fight to protect rather than conquer. This is rare. Reed considered how much to share with this new species. Vren had protected human colonists without asking for anything in return. That deserved honesty. Humanity learned hard lessons in our history. We know the cost of conquest, the price of domination. We chose a different path. And now the galaxy is learning about you. The Drathan Empire will never be the same after your passage. You showed them that power can be used for mercy. Before Reed could respond, alarms sounded throughout the ship. Tactical Officer Grant's voice came through the communication system with sharp urgency. Captain, to the bridge. We have multiple contacts entering the system. Krell raiders at least 20 vessels. Reed and Vren moved to their respective bridges simultaneously. The raiders had apparently decided that the arrival of human and Silith forces presented too great a threat to their future operations in this region. They were attacking in force, hoping to eliminate both groups before they could coordinate. Defensive formation, Reed ordered. Protect the colony at all costs. Grant, coordinate with Silith vessels for optimal fire distribution. Vren's ship and 6 others moved into position alongside the Defiant. The coordination was seamless, as if the 2 species had been training together for years. Silith vessels took flanking positions while the Defiant formed the center of the defensive line. The Krell came in fast and aggressive, 23 ships against 8 defenders. They had numerical superiority and assumed confidence would carry the day. They had never fought humans or Silith before and had no idea what they were facing. The battle lasted 9 minutes. Silith weapons proved to be elegant and precise, disabling enemy ships with minimal energy expenditure. The Defiant's overwhelming firepower provided a solid backbone to the defense. Together, the 2 species created a wall that the raiders could not penetrate. Not a single Krell ship reached the colony. 17 were disabled and drifting in space. 6 managed to escape back into faster-than-light travel, broadcasting warnings about the defended system. In the aftermath, Reed and Vren shared a moment of mutual respect. 2 species from different parts of the galaxy, meeting for the first time, had fought together to protect innocent lives. Captain Reed, I believe this is the beginning of something important, Vren said. The Silith Collective would like to open formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Reed smiled, thinking about what the bureaucrats back on Earth would say when he returned with a first contact treaty. I think Earth would welcome that conversation, though I should warn you, we're cautious about alliances. As are we, but caution between friends is wisdom, not weakness. You crossed an empire to save your people. We traveled here to help strangers. Perhaps we are not so different. On the colony's surface, Dr. Park administered the final vaccine doses. The plague was contained. Lives were saved. The mission that had driven the Defiant across hostile space was complete. 3 weeks after the Defiant's arrival, the colony of New Providence held a memorial service. Governor Walsh stood before a monument bearing 417 names, representing those who had died before the vaccines arrived. Children placed flowers at the base while adults stood in silent reflection. Captain Reed attended but did not speak. His crew had saved thousands, but the ones they could not save weighed heavily on his conscience. Dr. Park stood beside him, her eyes red from recently shed tears. They had done everything possible, crossed impossible distances, defied an empire. It still had not been enough to save everyone. They're naming the main hospital after your ship, Walsh said quietly to Reed after the ceremony. The Defiant Memorial Medical Center. I hope that's acceptable. Reed nodded, unable to find words. The colony had transformed in the weeks since their arrival. Silith engineers had helped construct new medical facilities. Human construction teams worked alongside alien specialists, building defenses that would prevent future raids. The partnership between species was flourishing in ways no one had anticipated. Vren's ship remained in orbit, his crew having developed genuine friendships with the human colonists. The Silith commander had transmitted detailed reports to his government about humanity, recommending full diplomatic recognition and mutual defense agreements. It's time for us to head home, Reed told Walsh. The Defiant needs proper maintenance, and my crew deserves leave after what they've been through. You're going back through Drathan space? Walsh asked with concern. It's still the fastest route, and I think the situation has changed. Walsh offered a tired smile. Captain, you didn't just change the situation. You changed the entire sector. We're receiving messages from species we've never heard of, all wanting to know more about humans. The Drathans are arguing among themselves about what your crossing means for their empire. The Defiant departed New Providence with the thanks of 4,000 colonists echoing in the crew's hearts. The return journey began much as the original crossing had, with entry into Drathan space and immediate detection by monitoring stations. But this time, no warships scrambled to intercept. Instead, A single vessel approached with navigation beacons active and weapons powered down. Admiral Corvin's familiar face appeared on the view screen. Captain Reed, on behalf of High Archon Severin, I am authorized to provide you with safe passage through Drathan territory. A corridor has been established for your transit. Reed felt genuine surprise. Admiral, I appreciate the courtesy. May I ask what changed? Corvin's expression was difficult to read. You did, Captain. Your actions forced us to examine ourselves. The High Archon has initiated reforms regarding subject species and military engagement protocols. Not everyone supports these changes, but they are happening. I never meant to cause internal problems for your empire. You didn't cause them, you revealed them. There is a difference. Corvin paused. I have one request. When you reach Earth, tell your government that some of us in the Drathan military would welcome diplomatic channels, not alliances or treaties but communication, understanding between our peoples. Reed agreed immediately. The Defiant's journey back through Drathan space was peaceful, almost ceremonial. Ships that had fought against them weeks earlier now maintained respectful distances. Civilian stations broadcast messages of acknowledgement as they passed. On Drathan Prime, High Archon Severin faced his most contentious council session yet. Defense Minister Talvis led the opposition, demanding Severin's resignation for weakness. You let one ship cross our entire empire, Talvis declared. You showed mercy to our enemies. This undermines everything we have built. Severin stood calmly before his critics. I showed pragmatism to a medical mission. I refused to make our empire look monstrous by preventing the saving of children, and I gained information about a species that could become either a valuable partner or a dangerous enemy. They humiliated our military. They demonstrated restraint. In every engagement, they could have killed thousands of our people. Instead, they disabled ships and offered aid. Severin let that sink in before continuing. Ask yourselves, council members, what kind of species possesses such power and chooses mercy, and what happens when we inevitably encounter threats that do not share their values. Nalith spoke from her position as Chief Intelligence Officer. I have been analyzing patterns across the galactic community. Species are watching how we respond to the human crossing. Some see us as weak for allowing it. Others see us as wise for recognizing superior force and avoiding needless conflict. But all of them are reassessing their relationships with us. The council argued for hours, but ultimately Severin's position held. The Empire would not seek revenge against humanity. Diplomatic channels would be explored cautiously. Military protocols would be updated to account for species that did not follow traditional patterns of conquest and expansion. The Defiant arrived at Earth's orbital defense perimeter to a hero's welcome. The crew was exhausted. The ship needed extensive repairs, but they had accomplished something extraordinary. They had saved a colony, made first contact with a new species, and changed the political landscape of an entire sector. Captain Reed presented his full report to the Human Coalition Council in a closed session that lasted for 2 days. He described every engagement, every decision, and every consequence of their actions. The Council listened with growing understanding of how humanity's position in the galaxy had transformed. You've given us opportunities and challenges in equal measure, Captain, Council Chair Anderson said after reviewing everything. The Silith want alliance. The Drathans want dialogue. Dozens of other species want to establish contact. We can no longer remain isolated. Reed had expected this conclusion. Sir, I recommend we proceed carefully. Show the same values in diplomacy that we showed in crossing Drathan space. Be honest, be firm, and never compromise on protecting our own. The Council approved formal diplomatic missions to both the Silith Collective and the Drathan Empire. Trade agreements would be explored. Military cooperation would be discussed with the Silith. Cultural exchanges would begin to build understanding. 6 months after the Defiant's crossing, Ambassador Wilson arrived at Drathan Prime for the first formal negotiations between humans and Drathans. High Archon Severin received her with full ceremonial honors, a gesture that would have been unthinkable before one ship had dared to cross his empire. In the conference room where treaties would be discussed, Severin spoke candidly to the human ambassador. Your Captain Reed taught us something important. Power without purpose is just destruction. Strength without values is just brutality. We are still learning these lessons. Wilson responded with equal honesty. We're still learning too, High Archon. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we're willing to share what we've discovered about balancing strength with compassion. On New Providence, the Defiant Memorial Medical Center treated its first patients. The facility incorporated both human and Silith medical technology, representing the cooperation that had grown from one desperate mission. Governor Walsh stood at the dedication ceremony, speaking to a crowd that included humans, Silith visitors, and even a few Drathan observers. This place exists because people refused to accept that distance and empires could prevent them from helping those in need. Captain Reed and his crew crossed impossible barriers because they believed in something simple: we take care of our own. Captain Reed himself was not present at the ceremony. The Defiant was in deep space, exploring new routes and surveying potential colony sites. The ship had been repaired and upgraded, its crew refreshed and ready for new challenges. Reed stood on his bridge, looking at the stars with the same dedication that had driven him to cross an empire. Course laid in for the Andromeda sector, Captain, Navigation Officer Chen reported. Take us out, Reed ordered. The Defiant moved forward into unknown space, carrying with it the lessons learned and the values that defined humanity. One ship had crossed an empire and changed everything. Now the galaxy waited to see what humanity would do next.